You talked about the MMA era that you went through versus today. What do you think is the main difference now?
Well, I would have to do organization for real. I mean, back then, again, it was very much a street fight,
Mm,
and there were basically no rules, like we just discussed, where you talk about a guy going in there and there's no eye gouging, there's no biting, no groin shots, um, and you could go in the fight and watch. I watched this happen to Josan, where the guy punched him in the groin 3 times, and he had to quit, and that was illegal. But the other guy still won because Josan couldn't continue. so, obviously, you look at it now. It's organized. It's sanctioned. There's safety involved in it to a point. It's still fighting, but there's just so much more about it that's professional.
mm. Well, Joe Rogan, he said that you could thrive in today's MMA era.
I appreciate that, and I do believe guys like myself and Royce Gracie, because we probably were the only two that had what we call professional skill sets when it came to grappling, that we could hold our own. I think that for me, because of the expertise in my leg locks, would definitely put me ahead, because there's not too many people that really truly understand even today, because they weren't allowed in other events when they were amateurs, so nobody practiced them when they got to the pro level. But when I did it in Japan, that's all we used. And so the expertise I had on leg locks, as far as what today's mixed martial arts has, was so much more advanced.
Yeah, Joe Rogan said champions rise to the level of competition that's around them. And I think guys like Frank Shamrock, Ken Shamrock, or Royce Gracie, they would rise today. They're champions. There's a mindset. They would just have to do things differently. So what do you think would be different with you fighting today?
Yeah, no question. I think a lot of it has to do with probably being educated on your opponent, who you're going against, and also even though I think anybody that knew me in the beginning, my conditioning was far advanced than most, but it would have to be the actual conditioning between rounds, because when you went like we did where there was no rounds, the conditioning was different. It was more long lasting, as opposed to now you can go hard and just explode, and then you rest for a minute and then you go again. So there's a lot different than the conditioning that we had when there was no time limit and there were no rounds, as opposed to now where there's rounds.
Yeah, Joe Rogan actually talked about training with you guys.
Yes.
He said Lions Den was one of the most difficult teams to join. They would try to break you. And Ken Shamrock would just let you know the worst thing you want to be in a fight is tired. You're going to get tired as fuck training with us, so the fight's going to be easy.
That's exactly the concept of our training, was that I wanted you to experience so much more worse than you'll ever experience in a fight. And the only way you can do that is by putting, because like myself, when I went to Japan, they put me in very difficult situations, because as I got good there, just one guy couldn't get me tired. One guy couldn't push me where I needed to go. So they had to put a guy in every minute. Every single minute there was a fresh guy on me, which would really make me tired, and I really had to work hard to stay on top. And so that's kind of the concept that I took and I put in the Lions Den, was that I wanted guys to understand that no matter how good you got, that when you train for a fight, you're going to be put in a position that you will never face in a fight.
I mean, Lions Den, is that really the first team in MMA?
I couldn't tell you. I know people say it is. Organized, as far as being organized.
Yeah.
I think the concept of what I think most people are talking about is the way the team was put together. I would do tryouts, and then of course the tryouts were brutal, because I needed to know I had the right mindset to be able to train somebody in this kind of a fight. And so if they did these tryouts and they made it through, I knew I had the guy I could train. And then they would move into a house, depending on whether they wanted to or not wanted to. They could, like Guy Mesger did. He went to Dallas and he trained from there, and he'd come in every now and then, and we would train and get him ready for fights. So there were different types of guys that would do that. But most of the guys were there and wanted to stay in the house and get that, 24-hour training. And so by doing that, we basically locked them into a situation where we had full control over conditioning and training and putting them in position to succeed.
I mean, were the Gracies doing something like that in Brazil or not really?
They didn't do the concept that we did because they weren't bond together as a team. They were bond together as what I guess you would call as a, I don't even know what to call it, because basically they're testing for belts. They don't really train together when it comes to fights all the time. Maybe there's a few of them, but not consistently. These guys were literally living in the house, and the Lions Den was put together just for fighting. And they all trained together when there was a fight. They all came together and trained together, the same guys, not different guys at different times that came in and you picked one from here and one from there. No, they were the same guys each time that everybody trained with.